I have had this snake plant since 2020 and never repotted her, so let's do it together. Snake plants generally have a shallow root system, but due to the size and age of this snake plant, I knew this would be deeper. You can see she's a little root bound but looks healthy. The easiest way to propagate a snake plant is by division. This means breaking apart the leaves, roots and rhizomes together at the base. This is so much faster than trying to root a cutting. I'm going to combine two snake plants together to make a very full plant. The bigger of the two is staying intact and the smaller I'm going to break apart and put around the outside. You can see the smaller of the two has a much shallower root system. The rhizomes were very easy and satisfying to break apart. If you wanted to propagate these, you could put them all in their own little pots, but I'm loving this big beefy gal. Now I know this plant isn't a cactus, but I am using a cactus soil mix and then giving her a good drink of water and popping in a bigger decorative pot. You can't tell me she doesn't look incredible. I love combining plants together to make a bigger one. I know I'm rogue for repotting on carpet, so here is a little behind the scenes of the quick cleanup as well. Let's check in on my snake plant pup propagation. I removed this pup from the main plant in May. I let the stem dry partially overnight and then popped it in water the next day. As well as the mushroom looking really cute, it's functional as well. Using colored glass helps to prevent algae growth, and having a smaller opening stops your plant from falling too far into the water. Having too much of your plant or stem submerged is what can cause rot. After just a few weeks, roots started to pop out, and 2 months later, she's ready to plant. Although the roots are long enough to put her into soil, I am going to keep her as a water propagation because I want to see how snake plants go in hydro. You can propagate snake plants via leaf cuttings or pups, as I've done here. In my experience, propagating from a pup has a much higher success rate and also roots much faster. These grew in just 2 months over winter. This cactus never seems to hold water, which makes me think that the soil has become hydrophobic. Water should not just be running through, and it never drinks up when I bottom water it. See, the water just runs straight through, it's not being absorbed at all. So let's change it. So you can see I just gave it a water, and this is so dry still, so the soil is not absorbing. Okay. So let's get this old soil off and put some fresh on. Let's test the water now. That's what we're going to see, especially when you're only watering it once a month. Let's repot my Senecio rallianus, more commonly known as the string of pearls. This plant is usually my kryptonite, but somehow I've kept this one alive for a few months. I have found that this plant has very specific requirements to thrive, so let's go through what I've been doing. Being a succulent, it of course needs very well draining soil. You can buy a cactus soil, which is what I have done, or you can make one of your own, making sure to include sand. This will help drain away any excess water, which is usually what causes this plant to die. Whilst we're on it, let's talk about watering needs. This plant has very low watering requirements and likes to dry out fully in between each soak. The pearls on this plant actually store the water, and you will notice they start to shrivel when it gets thirsty. They can survive long periods without water, so this is definitely one which is better to underwater than overwater. I've always been told that they have a shallow root system, but on repotting this one, I found that not to be the case. Being so, I think it is absolutely fine to only bottom water this plant. I find top watering is the #1 killer and also attracts pests like fungus gnats. Now I know I'm always preaching to use nursery pots, but this does not apply to cacti or succulents. For these plants, it's better to put them directly into a porous pot such as terracotta or unglazed ceramic. Succulents and cacti thrive in arid conditions and need pots that allow for fast drainage and aeration. Terracotta is a porous material, meaning both air and water can pass through it. This means if there is a buildup of water in the soil, it'll actually get absorbed into some of the pot. This is exactly what we want for the string of pearls. As terracotta can breathe, it means that you will also avoid root rot. Root rot usually happens when oxygen cannot get down into the roots. Let's move on to sunlight. The string of pearls can thrive in direct and indirect sunlight. Although they do like a sunnier spot, if they get too much direct sunlight at the hottest part of the day, their leaves can get scorched. I have also noticed that they can change color if they're getting too much sun. You may also lose some of your pearls and end up with a leggy looking plant. As always, for this repot, I've added a mesh round down the bottom. This stops soil from falling out the bottom but still allows water to get through. As I repotted this to change from plastic to terracotta, I haven't gone too much bigger. I have added some extra cactus soil down the bottom and around the sides and tried as best I could not to let any of the pearls get stuck inside. I'm now going to soak the plant and the terracotta pot, and you'll see what I mean when I say it's really absorbent. You can see the water get absorbed by the terracotta pot as it changes color. This is such a good way to see how water gets absorbed up through your plant. You know, I love to bottom water but often get questions of how high the water goes. And you can see here that you don't need to leave it too long for it to take effect. Whilst she's having a good old guzzle, let's talk about some common problems for the string of pearls. As I mentioned before, overwatering is usually the issue and causes root rot. If your pearls are shrinking, they may be underwatered or be getting too much sunlight. These plants can also be prone to some pests, including mealybugs. This is because mealybugs are like a drier environment, which is exactly what you've created. If you spot it early, you should just be able to pull them off though. If your plant has gone really leggy, it's also most likely lacking sunlight, or you may have bumped it. These pearls are pretty easy to knock off. Luckily, it's a very easy plant to propagate, and I've actually found keeping it in hydro often works better. To propagate this plant, you can just take cuttings from any of the strings, put these cuttings in water, and that's basically it. You don't need to worry too much about a node or anything, but try not to have any of the pearls down submerged in the water. And that's basically it. Just leave it in a warm, sunny spot like all propagations, and within a few weeks you should see roots start to grow. I found that this plant doesn't need any nutrients or rooting hormone to produce roots. You can either keep it growing in water if you like hydro plants like I do, or you can transfer it to soil. You can see here what the roots look like. If my sop starts to fail, I'm going to turn it into a hydro plant. Let's transfer my Euphorbia trigona from a nursery pot to ceramic. I know I'm always telling you to use nursery pots for your houseplants, but this does not apply to cacti. This is because nursery pots help to retain moisture in soil. Whilst this is great for a lot of plants, it is not great for desert plants. I knew I was going to repot this African milk tree, so have not watered in quite some time. Having dry soil makes the repot a little bit cleaner. Please use thick gloves when you are repotting a cactus. I have tried the towel hack and it did not end well. I'm planting the cacti back into the same pot. I'm adding a small mesh round down the bottom to catch any excess soil. You can buy cactus soil or make your own. Try to mimic their natural environment, which is an arid, sandy place. I'm using unglazed ceramic here, which means the pot will absorb some of the water. This happens with terracotta as well, and is a really good idea for plants that like to be drier. The pot will retain some of the water and release it into the soil as it dries. As the material is porous, both water and air can get through it. These are both so important for this plant. As always, this planter of course has a drainage hole, so let's go bottom water my Euphorbia trigona. I water my cacti monthly in summer and less in the cooler seasons. These plants don't need a lot of fertilizer, and 2 to 3 times a year is fine. As for placement, this is definitely not a bathroom plant. They like a bright, sunny spot with low humidity. The African milk tree does not like a drafty environment either. Try to keep her in a sunny spot away from an air conditioner. Let's go through some care requirements for the Christmas cactus while I repot mine. The Schlumberdera or Christmas cactus is not actually a cactus at all, it is a succulent. This flowering beauty can produce red, pink or white flowers and hails from the forests of Brazil. Being so, it has higher water and humidity requirements compared to other succulents. I water mine every 2 to 3 weeks depending on the season. Like most plants, the Christmas cactus will go dormant in the cooler months, but this is also when it produces flowers. This plant will thrive with humidity from 50 to 70% and can also benefit from misting. When it comes to soil, I recommend combining a succulent soil with a regular indoor houseplant soil. This ensures some dryness in between waterings, but also ensures that excess water can drain away. As always, you must use a planter or decorative pot with a hole, or you can use a nursery pot and put this inside your decorative planter. I've been slowly transferring all my succulent and cacti to terracotta pots. I find they don't require the added moisture that a nursery pot provides. Terracotta pots are an excellent choice for succulents and cacti. The porous nature of the pot encourages better air circulation and moisture evaporation. I always add a little mesh around to the base of my pots to ensure that soil isn't falling through. The Christmas cactus enjoys a fairly bright spot. Place it somewhere that gets bright, indirect, and direct light throughout the day. If your plant isn't blooming, it can be a sign that it needs more sunlight. Be careful putting it in direct, harsh afternoon sun though, because you may scorch the leaves. This plant isn't a heavy feeder, and fertilizing every 4 to 6 weeks in the growing season is fine. As with most succulents, this plant is very easy to propagate. You can see she propagated herself with this small little leaf that had rooted. To intentionally propagate, you want to take a section with 2 to 3 segments. Let the cutting dry overnight and then transfer to soil. As for common problems, if you've got yellowing leaves or mushy stems, you may be overwatering. If your plant looks wilted or shriveled, then you may be underwatering. A leaf drop and brown tips is a sign of lack of humidity. If you spot some sticky residue on your leaves, you may have a pest such as aphids or mealybugs. I like to bottom water this plant so she is fully saturated but doesn't have wet topsoil. If you're using terracotta or unglazed ceramics, try not to put the pot directly onto wood. As the pot does retain moisture, it can promote mold growth. Putting a marble coaster or glazed ceramic or glass underneath is a great option. Let me know if you have any other questions about this pretty plant.